Hi, class. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, Adult Literacy and English Language, please do that today and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you. I am going to read The Janitor's Boy by Andrew Clements, Chapter 16, Behind the Curtain. And I will be reading while at work, so if you hear any noise in the background, please overlook it, and I apologize in advance. After school, Jack was surprised to find Mr. Ackerby waiting for him in the workshop. His first thought was that Luke Carnes had ratted, and now he would have a whole bunch of new trouble. Mr. Ackerby said, "Hello, Jack. I wanted you to know that I've been checking up on you. I got a good report from Mrs. Stokely. She says you're a hard worker, and I'm glad to hear it." Jack nodded and tried to look pleasant. Mr. Ackerby's compliment was sort of like having the jailer praise you for being a wonderful little prisoner. Mr. Ackerby went on, "I also came down here to find John. I feel pretty stupid not realizing right away that you were his son. I worked with him on our move all summer long. We'd come up against a problem, and he'd figured out a way to solve it every time. He certainly has this building in great shape. A big piece this old doesn't keep working all by itself, that's for sure." Jack didn't know what to say, so he just nodded and said, "Yeah." Mr. Ackerby was used to having kids feel uncomfortable when he talked to them. It was usually what he wanted, but he'd snooped around and he had learned that Jack Rankin was a pretty good kid. Good student, honest, and rarely in trouble. Every teacher Mr. Ackerby had approached seemed quite surprised about the incident in music class. So Mr. Ackerby was trying to give their relationship a friendlier tone. He asked, "Where are you working today?" Jack said, "I have to start in the auditorium," and to himself, Jack added, "Thanks to you and your slave labor program." Mr. Ackerby nodded. His eyebrows lifted. "Another big job. Well, I won't keep you. I'm going to wait here another few minutes to see if I can catch your dad." And Jack, what with the 3-day weekend coming up and all, if you want to cut out and at 3 today instead of 3:30, that'll be okay. Yeah, thanks. Pretty chintzy gift, but it was better than nothing." Jack left the workshop with a new impression of Mr. Ackerby. The guy seemed almost human. Mr. Ackerby was the second person who had said that cleaning gum in the auditorium would be a big job. When Jack told Lou where he would be working, Lou whistled and then said, "Well, nobody's going to accuse your daddy of giving you special treatment, that's for sure. So it would be a big job, so what? The bigger the better." He was Jack, the fearless one, the climber of towers, the keeper of the keys, ready to do battle. Jack pulled open the center door at the back of the auditorium. His heart sank. He stood there, one medium-sized boy, armed with a red bucket and a putty knife. 875 folding seats stared at him in silent defiance. The place was vast. The floor sloped sharply downward toward a wide stage. The dusty gold curtain was 2/3 open, and the area backstage was completely dark. The pale green walls needed fresh paint. High windows along the east walls let in the gloomy afternoon light. It looked to Jack like more snow was on the way. The theater-style seats swung in a graceful arc, with an aisle on the east and west, and one up the center. The backs and seats' bottoms were covered with fake brown leather fastened on by brass upholstery tacks, and the wooden underside of almost every seat was pock-marked with wads of gum. With a deep sigh, Jack set down his bucket and began removing gum from the bottom of seat number 1 in row W. The scraping and rubbing sounds that had seemed so loud in the library were lost in the huge room, as if they floated off into outer space. Jack got into the rhythm of the work. Seat by seat, he moved across the wide back row, turned the corner, and headed back. He would work on a seat until it was done, straighten up, push the bucket forward with his foot, then bend down and start the next one. He scraped carefully, trying not to scratch the dark plywood, and he wasn't satisfied until his seat bottom was completely clean. By the time he had cleaned 2 rows, it was getting so dark that sometimes Jack couldn't tell if he had got all the gum off by scraping it, or if should use the offit to finish the job. He put his putty knife in the bucket, went to the center aisle, and walked downward toward the stage. Time to turn on some lights. Vaulting easily up onto the front of the stage, Jack walked behind the curtain toward the right, his footsteps hollow on the wooden floor. He had worked on the lighting crew for a play at his old school, and he knew what to look for. Somewhere there had to be a switch labeled House Lights. He headed for the right-hand wall. Backstage was a mess. Music stands and folding chairs were scattered about, and at a set of dented kettle drums was half covered by large cardboard panels. They were pieces of scenery that had been painted to look like big blocks of stone along the top of a castle wall. A rack that used to hold costumes and had tipped over, and wire coat hangers lay in a tangled heap. Jack's eyes adjusted to the darkness of the stage, and he could see there was no light panel near the right-hand door. He had an about face and headed left, walking along the back wall of the stage area. Near the middle of the stage, Jack tripped on something and went sprawling onto the floor. Rubbing his eyes, he stood up and looked back to see what had caused the fall. It was the silver blade of a long sword, half hidden by a black curtain covering the rear wall of the stage. He bent over, pulled the whole thing out from behind the curtain, and straightened up to get a good look at it. It was just a stage prop made of wood, but it had been well made and carefully painted. It was a knight's broadsword with a wide hilt and a long handle, made to be swung using both hands. It was almost 4 feet long. Jack swung it, and it made a pleasant whirring sound as he carved the air. It felt good in his hands, holding it out in front of him at eye level. He lunged toward the curtain, pretending to jab the evil knight. A clank came from behind the curtain, maybe armor or something. There was a break in the curtain about 6 feet to his left, so Jack walked over, grabbed it, and held on as he stepped about 10 paces back toward the right. Just as Jack suspected, more stuff lay hidden behind the curtain. He saw a long jousting lance made from a bamboo pole and a shield that had once been a metal trash can lid. It had been spray painted white and then decorated with a red lion wearing a gold crown. But that wasn't the best thing. The best thing had nothing to do with knights and armor and swordsplay. The best thing was very simple. It was a door. On the door there was just one word: access. Jack put down his wooden sword and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a key. The light was too dim to see the number, but he could feel there were only 2 numerals stamped on it. It had to be key 73. He pushed the key into the jagged keyhole, held his breath, and turned. Bingo! The door hinged on the left, and Jack pulled it open wide. Peering into the shadows, he saw a short landing just inside the door and a set of metal stairs, 9 steps down, maybe more. It was very dark in there. There was a light switch on the wall to the right of the landing, but when Jack flipped it, nothing happened. Suddenly aware of how his heart was pounding, Jack let himself off the hook. There was no hurry. Now that the door was found, he could take his time, gather some equipment, do a proper exploration. No need to go rushing down into that place. So he started to shut the door. And when he had the door almost shut, Jack noticed something strange. When a door is almost shut, there's usually a flow of air, either in or out. The flow of air hitting Jack in the face was coming out of the tunnel. Nothing strange about that. It wasn't the air itself that was odd, it was what the air was carrying. The air was carrying a smell. It was faint, so faint that Jack thought he must be imagining it. But it was a smell Jack knew very well, too well. It was the smell of watermelon bubblegum. I hope that you are enjoying this story just as much as I am. We are almost to the end, class. If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, like and subscribe to my channel, and tune in next time for Chapter 17. Thank you for watching. See you.